Hey friends, this channel is usually about exploring the outdoors, hiking remote trails, and falling in love with the wild corners of the world. But today I need to talk to you something closer to home and my heart. Because as of this week, the future of PBS, NPR, and public broadcasting in America is under direct attack. On Thursday, the Trump administration issued an executive order to cut all federal funding to NPR and PBS. In a statement, the White House accused these outlets of spreading what it called woke propaganda and ordered the Corporation for Public Broadcasting to cancel funding and block future support. This is not just about budget cuts. This is a deliberate attempt to silence voices that offer honest journalism, educational programming, and free public access to information. Things like this matter. And I know we have just an onslaught of negative things happening in the media, but this matters for millions of Americans, especially in rural communities. PBS and NPR are lifelines. They provide free TV and radio without subscriptions. They deliver weather alerts, emergency broadcasts, local updates, election coverage, and fact-based journalism. PBS is where so many of us watched Mr. Rogers, Nova, Nature, Frontline, Ken Burns documentaries, and PBS NewsHour. It's also where my own TV show airs, a show built around educating and inspiring people about our public lands, about our wild places, and global cultures. And I want to take a moment to highlight what this means for my own local PBS station where my show airs, called KSPS. This station, which serves the Inland Northwest and parts of Western Canada. They recently shared that federal funding from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting makes up about 19% of their annual budget. That's not just a number, it's a lifeline to these local communities. It's what allows KSPS, like all PBS stations, to beam free, over-the-air educational program into rural towns, over mountains and valleys, even in places where there's no reliable internet. That funding supports 8 hours a day of free, research-backed children's programming for families who can't afford preschool. And it does a lot of other things too. It's translators and signal towers that reach seniors, families, and remote communities. It provides emergency alert systems during times of crisis when cell towers or internet might go down. And it powers local storytelling. Shows like Inland Sessions, Northwest Profiles, and Career Explore Northwest, helping tell the stories of real people in our region. And wherever you may live in America or Canada, you likely get some of this programming that's not just giving you news and education, but also teaching you about your local area. If you're wondering about my PBS show, I do not get paid for this show at all. Because PBS and NPR and other corporate public media corporations are funded by donations and the federal government, they very rarely purchase television shows, and they have to abide by very strict regulations and rules as far as the educational components that go into these shows, about the sponsors who help support these shows. Now, my show is self-funded. I do not have any sponsors, but if I did, one of the rules with PBS is that the sponsors of your videos cannot have any sort of stake in the video itself. For instance, if the Visit Los Angeles wanted to sponsor a video, the video could not be just strictly telling you about how awesome Los Angeles is. Well, it could be a component. That would go against the fair broadcasting rules when it comes to putting things on public broadcasting. So you won't see oil companies making videos about how great oil is for the world on stations like PBS. So people can argue that it's biased, but the rules of engagement and making content for these types of channels actually disallows that from happening. And it really doesn't take much taxpayer dollars to make this happen, just $1.60 per person per year, a tiny investment for an immeasurable return. KSPS does what all PBS stations do. It connects, educates, and informs. And if this executive order moves forward, it threatens all of that. So yes, this hits me personally, but it's not just about me. This affects millions of kids who rely on PBS for educational shows like Sesame Street. It affects elderly Americans who rely on public radio for connection. It affects low-income families who can't afford cable or streaming subscriptions. And it affects the freedom of the press, which is foundational to a healthy democracy. And I know there are going to be many people that argue that PBS and NPR are Democratic leaning. But if this is your argument, I challenge you to go listen to Al Jazeera and the BBC and DW News, news stations in other countries that are not biased against our government. They are also reporting honest journalism. Their stories go hand in hand with what you will hear on PBS and NPR. And yes, you could then argue that the entire world is more democratic. But if you really put your thinking cap on and think about this, is there a conspiracy against Republicans in the entire world? I don't think so. They're just reporting the facts. And if the facts tend to be more democratic, then so be it. But PBS and NPR are so much more than just the news hour. As I have said in this video already, it is educational content, it is local stories, it is emergency alerts, it is giving people access to entertainment, education, and things that they need to know to stay safe in their community that they may not be able to get anywhere else. But the larger pattern here is that this executive order is part of a broader effort to dismantle publicly funded arts, media, and education. Since returning to office, Trump has already slashed hundreds of millions in funding libraries, museums, and universities, which makes no sense to me. He's tried to dissolve Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, and other independent media arms as well. And now he's turning the same hostility toward the public broadcasters here at home. I grew up in a really small town, and until I was 15 or so, we only had the channels that we could get with bunny ears, which meant I think we got 2 television channels, we got PBS, and we got on the radio a couple of channels as well, NPR being one of those. So for me, as someone that grew up in a really rural area, PBS and NPR and other public broadcast agencies were really fundamental in my childhood. Yes, I watched Sesame Street, I watched Mr. Rogers, I listened to NPR for the weather, for emergency services as we were growing up, because we had power outages and storms all of the time. And still to this day, so many Americans rely on these services, and they should be funded partially by the government. I have been to PBS stations. I obviously have a TV show on one, and I have seen firsthand how scrappy they are in trying to create the things that they create, because they just do not have enough money to do that. They have a very small team, and their operating budgets are very small compared to the big media that we see on cable. And I know that many people think that they are biased, but it's because they're sharing the truth. It's because they're sharing educational things that are backed by science, by history. They're not making things up as they go. It is just so hard this year. And I know a lot of you are feeling that. There are so many things that are being attacked right now, especially if you are lower income, middle income, or in poverty. You know, the Trump administration is not only trying to attack our public lands, now trying to attack public media, but also rolling back environmental regulations, deregulating a lot of different polluting corporations, which is having a profound effect on people that don't have the money to fight against this. And that is a huge problem. You know, we should all have access to clean air, clean water, and information. And if the attacks continue on getting rid of our free access to information, to education, to weather and emergency, and we deregulate more and more, we rip up more and more of our public lands, well, we're really taking away, you know, the things that make this country great. So if there's anything that you can do to share this message, to talk to your local representatives, to just share this with a friend, please do. I will be back next week with another outdoor adventure. But in the meantime, stay curious and stay